So Muscat's mission and vision are about Philippine knowledge, kaalaman, ancestral and contemporary, across time and ethno-linguistic groups, to sharpen our awareness of who we are for ourselves and the rest of the world. It provides opportunities to engage the public in discovering, recuperating, understanding, appreciating, and celebrating the complex layers of Filipino kaalaman. Muscat tends to museological functions such as research, curatorship, public programs, publications, and collections management, principally at this time conservation and registration. Muscat is animated by an understanding that kaalaman is inherited and transmitted. It recognizes and rejoices in the aesthetic integrity and creative philosophy, in the outstanding skills and commitment of our artists. You just saw Yeyabing and a Tiboli musician. Muscat acknowledges the diwa, the spiritual sense and essence in kaalaman. Muscat respects the bonds between humans and their environment and the balance that must be maintained between them. It searches for the inspiration behind processes that bring forth the most exquisite textile, the handsomest weapon, astonishing basketry. It is sensitive to the physicality and materiality of the objects themselves, to steer not only the study of forms and technology, but also the appropriate conservation strategy for the well-being of cultural objects. Muscat is a generous, passionate sharer of learnings, of memories, of stories, kaalaman held by objects. It is the desire and hope of Muscat to encourage, inspirit, and invigorate pride, admiration, and affection for kaalamang katutubo, as indeed for and in all things. At this juncture, may I ask Raymond Santiago, museum colleague who takes care of registration and conservation, to introduce our speaker. Raymond, please take over.
Thank you, Ms. Cora, and a pleasant good afternoon to all our guests. I have been tasked to introduce our speaker this afternoon. Though I believe he needs very little introduction, especially in the cultural and academic circuits. Felipe M. De Leon Jr. is a professor, writer, and composer. He was chairman of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts from 2011 to 2016. He is currently head of the NCCA's National Committee on Music. Our speaker is active in promoting and preserving Philippine indigenous cultural heritage and specializes in aesthetics, music theory, and culture, and human development issues. He has written music for plays and musicals and has been the musical director of Kasarinlan, a vocal and instrumental music ensemble dedicated to Philippine music cultures since 1985. Our speaker is also a lecturer in the international and academic circuit and currently a professor at the Asian Social Institute on Development Studies and Social Transformation courses. He was chairman of the Humanities Department of the UP Diliman from 1976 to 1982. Yeah. Thus, Muscat is thankful, happy, and privileged to have with us, Professor De Leon with us this afternoon. Now, let me utter a word or two about the conduct of the lecture this afternoon. Our speaker will first give his talk, and after which he was most graciously agreed. He was most gracious to agree to responding to questions afterwards. Kindly post your questions on the message tab of your Google Meet, and we will be happy to post your inquiries and clarifications. Please state your name and the institution you represent, if applicable or if any. So at this point, without further ado, I would like to call on Professor De Leon for his lecture this afternoon entitled A Heritage of Connectivity. Professor De Leon.
Okay. Thank you, Raymond. Maraming salamat sa imbita sa akin, Ms. Cora Alvina, and I'm very glad that Muscat is very active in really sharing the knowledge about our culture. Kasi nga, ang kultura ay hindi dumadaan sa dugo. It's not a biological concept. That's why it has to be learned, it has to be taught, it has to be transmitted, otherwise, mawawala yan, no? I entitled my talk, The Heritage of Connectivity, kasi nga, mahilig sa connection ng Pilipino, connection sa kapwa. At first, let's look at culture. Culture fundamentally shapes the way we live. We are both biological and cultural beings. Kaya nga, relevant sa ating dinadanas ngayon, yung pandemic. When a disease becomes a pandemic and affects a large part of the world, we cope with it in both biological and cultural ways. The impact of the disease can be greater or lesser depending on our values and beliefs, cosmology, social structures, and economic systems. Yan, halos lahat ng leader from all over the world, wanted to contain the COVID. And the way is to bolster health cooperation measures, share information and experiences, keep supply chains open and facilitate joint research and development of vaccines and antiviral medicines. And also a commitment to take collective action and coordinate policies. No? Of course, iba-ibang kultura, that's why different nations took different paths to achieve a common goal. Because while all were committed to a united front to fight against the virus, countries took different paths to achieve this goal. Ang pinakamahigpit on the stringency of public measures to control the spread of the COVID, 3 ASEAN countries that imposed the highest levels of stringency are Vietnam, Laos, and the Philippines. Tayo pinakamahigpit sa buong Southeast Asia, tayong tatlong bansang ito. Pero this is really important. Stringency alone, no matter how high the level, is not enough. Doctors said that measures to contain the disease, such as detection, isolation, and contact tracing, had to be done at the very outset of the pandemic. So the government should provide and analyze figures systematically, cooperate with news agencies, disseminate information widely, and engage the cooperation of the people. Kung hindi gagawin niya, talagang hindi natin makokontrol, no? Of course, the countries that implemented this holistic approach had greater successes in beating COVID-19 than those which did not. At the same time, it's important to impose strict measures to control the pandemic without resorting to intimidation and strong-arm tactics. Especially in the Philippines, in our country, where a traditional culture of community self-help still prevails, compassion and not coercion will work better. No? Hindi pwedeng sapilitan yan. Filipinos appreciate the value of discipline, but it has to come from a shared understanding of its importance for the common good. So it's really compassion, not coercion. Filipinos, for example, like to be treated as part of a family, where the discipline often enforced by father figure emanates from love and concern for the good of the children, not from the desire to inflict pain alone. Importante yan eh. Otherwise, hindi masyadong susunod ang mga Pilipino. Really, culture is a mindset. The one that determines the political and economic agendas and behavior of nations. If a culture or if a regime prioritizes power and wealth, the consequence will be a divided society with much inequality of power and wealth. Alam natin yan, no? On the other hand, if a culture values the common good or social investment more, there will be a more equitable distribution of wealth and power and will not be monopolized by a few. Most people are not aware that in any society, there are at least 4 cultures. In any society, there's no exception. All throughout history, there have been the cultures of 1, power, where people are attached to power and privilege, control and domination. Culture of wealth, where people are attached to wealth and material goods, possessions, pleasure, and comfort. Ang pangatlo, kakonti lang nakakagawa nito because mahirap ito. The culture of the common good, devotion to pagpapakatao. Mayroon tayong kasabihan, madaling maging tao, mahirap pagpapakatao. It's easy to be born as a human being, but very difficult to be humane. This is the culture devoted to the search for wisdom, spirituality, creativity, strength of character, love, and sharing. the culture of devotion to a higher cause. Hindi madali yan. Kaya all over the world, konti lang ang nakakapunta sa kulturang ito. No? Well, some reflections. Persons addicted to the culture of power see themselves as outsiders, feel alienated from the people, and are purely motivated by self-interest. Driven by fear, insecurity, and hate and ego, no? They view everybody else as hostile and potential enemies, except for the immediate family and inner circle of friends. We are reminded of the Godfather, no? Mabait siya sa pamilya niya, pero lahat ng iba kalaban niya. They behave like bullies, attempting to subjugate, control, and manipulate others, especially the weak. Being outsiders, they cannot feel compassion for others. The only language they know is force and violence. Persons addicted to the culture of wealth similarly feel as outsiders. Disconnected sila sa society. They don't have empathy for others and are mostly self-serving. Also driven by inner insecurity and fear of a hostile social and natural environment, they become ruthlessly competitive, amassing wealth at the expense of others. They consider everything as commodities that can be controlled and traded to satisfy their insatiable greed for money. Yung pangatlo, persons who belong to the culture of the common good have a deep feeling of being insiders. Part kayo ng community, part kayo ng sambayanan, and not separate, no? You feel as part of a big family, and they have compassion and capacity to sacrifice for the good of others. Often, they are devoted community workers who are not driven by self-interest. Instead of force, they use the language of persuasion. Sabi nga ng aking ama, ang marahang pangungusap sa puso yung nakalulunas. They lead by example, volunteer their services for free, and initiate community self-help endeavors. Yan ang bayanihan, no? Ngayon, karamihan ng mga tao gumagalaw lang dahil may pera. Bihirang-bihira na ng bayanihan, no, as practice. So, the three main cultures and their practitioners. Culture of power, usually practiced by politicians, the police, and military. Culture of wealth, businessmen, tycoons. Culture of the common good, kukunti lang ang nakakapunta riyan. Civic society, spiritual leaders, humanitarians, and educators. People who work in the field of culture usually belong to this. Jose Rizal, Mabini, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Schindler, at marami pa ba, kagaya ni Pope Francis, no? Ano ba ang working for the common good? Mahirap, no? Because it requires sacrifice. Belonging to the culture of the common good requires a lot of voluntary effort and sacrifice and brings little or no monetary reward. For example, if you work for civic causes, you are part of a voluntary body which aims to represent the needs of a local community, like helping to provide shelter for the homeless or joining a reforestation project. Walang pera madalas yan, no? So, there are these three cultures of power, wealth, and the common good. These are constants in any society, in any period of history. They're present in every society and have always coexisted throughout history, although a society may lean more on one or the other. China is now much obsessed with power. Alam niyo, si Jinping, no? Trump's America seems more inclined towards wealth than power. Bhutan, with its gross happiness index of social development, is apparently for the common good. Tayo ba? Nasaan ba tayo, no? Ngayon, there's a fourth culture. This is the creative construct of a society. Pag medyo matanda na ang isang lipunan, they're able to invent a way of looking at life. Well, they could emphasize power or wealth or the common good, depending on the culture na invent nila. Through time, a society constructs a unifying vision of life, nakasama na yan ang pananaw or worldview and their idea of reality. Ano ang katotohanan? From this comes a culture's core values, which in turn promote the cultivation or cultural skills that realize these values, no? Ano yung laman ng isang ethnicity? According to UNESCO, these are the contents of ethnicity. Yan ang gagaling ng inyong oral traditions, including languages, performing arts, social practices, rituals, and festive events. Ang yaman natin yan, no? We have so many fiestas, knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe, and traditional craftsmanship. Ang Muscat, ang galing sa pag-conserve, no? Pagpapakita ng galing natin sa traditional craftsmanship. Yan ang laman ng ethnicity. A very new society, wala pang masyado. Wala silang sariling language, wala silang sariling celebrations. But all societies like the Philippines have many of this, so much of this. Ngayon, it's important to note that the core principles of our ethnicity, na-invent natin, our cultural construct, which are kapwa-based or bayanihan-based, are built upon the culture of the common good. rather than the culture of power or the culture of wealth. Mga Pilipino, on the whole, we are not for the culture of power or the culture of wealth, except a few na mga family dynasties dyan, sa kamay na silaw sa pera, na silaw sa power. Ilan lang yan compared to the majority of the Filipinos, no? Anyway, we are more for the culture of the common good. That's why relationships are more important for most Filipinos than economic power. Meron tayong kasabihan. Mabuti pa kubo na ang nakatira ay tao kaysa sa palasyo ang nakatira ay kuwago, no? What is kapwa? In Cebuano, closest to kapwa is buot. In Ilocano is nakem. In Pampanga is among the items is pamulamu-lamu. Marami tayong terms related to kapwa. This is an awareness of the rootedness of each one of us in the one divine essence within. Iisa lang tayong lahat. All of humanity is one. That's why kapwa implies the golden rule of all the great religions. Treat your neighbor as you treat yourself because your neighbor is yourself. Yan ang ibig sabihin ng kapwa. Look, as explained by Dr. Enriquez, Dr. Susan Reyes, Rogelio Petuba, and many other psychologists who studied the concept of kapwa, ito ang ibig sabihin ng kapwa. Imagine the whole universe as a big infinite sun. Nasa gitna niyan is the creative living principle. You may call it the force, God, the creative living presence. Each one of us is a ray of this creative living presence or creative living principle. Di ba ba, yung nasa kaliwa, you, kayo yan, ako nasa kanan, me, all of us are rays of the divine. That's a very, very Filipino concept. In fact, kung titignan niyo yung mga Tiboli, sabi nila yung mga ideas nila for living come from their dreams. Hindi galing sa kanila, it comes from a divine source. Ganyan din yung taga-Banahaw, yung psychic sergeants natin, yung power nila, hindi sila ang pinanggalingan. They are just mediums of a higher force. This is very, very common Filipino belief. So we are all one. Lahat tayo ay galing sa gitna, sa core na yan. That's why the Filipino core idea is treat the other person as you treat yourself because the other person is also yourself. Very, very Filipino idea. So each one of us is a unique expression of this divine essence within, the creative living presence in the universe. Bawat isa sa atin ay sinag ng dakilang may likha. Every person is a soul. An individual ray of this infinite source. So, this is the meaning of kapwa, shared identity. And it is the core of Filipino psychology, humaneness at the highest level. It implies a unique moral obligation to treat one another as equal fellow human beings. So in principle, ang pakikipagkapwa ay hindi gamitan. Excludes any action that may be detrimental or harmful to other human beings. Definitely inconsistent with exploitative human transactions. Yan ang totoong Filipino value, hindi pakikisama. Pakikisama, mababaw yun eh. That's a surface value. Kasi ang pinakikisamahan natin, bisita. Pag hindi na kayo bisita, hindi niyo kailangan pakisamahan. No? So, pakikipagkapwa is compassion. Among the core principles of Filipino psychology rooted in pakikipagkapwa is malasakit. Ano ba explaining malasakit? Most of us use it without understanding. Actually, this is the capacity to take the burden of the other person as your own. And according to the DFA, according to our diplomats, this is the outstanding virtue of many Filipino workers, including OFWs. So, the ultimate basis of human connectivity, bakit tayo connected? Because of the belief in kapwa, that each one of us is a unique expression of a divine being or God. Na bawat isa sa atin ay sinag ng dakilang may likha, thus making us all one. If you look at Babaylan culture, yung Babaylan ay medium lang yan of a higher force all over the country. Yan ang paniniwala natin, no? And we go through life exploring this connectedness, exploring, realizing, and strengthening this oneness. So who are we? How do we identify ourselves as a people? We are people who are highly skilled in creating situations, activities, or things that bring people together. Yan ang henyo natin. Since we love to connect to people, then we enjoy and excel in making things and activities that connect people. Then, therefore, we are masters of human connectivity. May kanya-kanyang henyo ang bawat kultura eh. Kaya tayo napakahilig sa connection. We love to connect, especially with people. Maski ano pang ginagawa natin, we like to feel connected to the world, God, and nature, but most of all, to people. Kaya walang gustong maiwanan sa kudapan. Naku, kung umpisa kayo sa isa, parami ng parami, hanggang ngayon maging karami. Dahil lahat gustong sumali sa picture. We love to be together. Together is happiness. Hindi na kumakain na nag-iisa. Pag may nag-iisang kumakain, naaawa kayo. Kaya nag-iisa, gusto mo samahan kita. Invite a person to your party. How many will come? Sa mga hospital, palaging may extra bed kasi palaging may bantay. Which is good medically because according to doctors, mas lalo yung bantayan, samahan yung may sakit, mas madaling gagaling. So our culture is a culture of health and healing actually. Tapos palangiti tayo. That's the easiest way to connect. Ayaw natin magbigay ng 3 prizes lang because we love to give prizes to everybody. Kaya nag-invent tayo ng mga special prizes. We are so eager for social networking. That's why we are the social media capital of the world. Yan ang sabi, no? We are the texting, Facebook, and selfie capital of the world. Uuwi na lang kayo, may pabalot pa. Balato is sharing of winnings. Bonus is the best gift from a person after staying abroad for a long time, no? Para pag-uwi, meron pa siyang bibigay sa inyo na sign na konektado ba kayo? No? Yun yung pasalubong. Tingnan nyo, ang art may not be the most important aspect of culture because I think the most basic element of culture is language, more than art. But ang art is pinakamalinaw sa salamin ng kultura natin. The clearest mirror of culture is art, are the arts. Tingnan nyo ang paintings natin. 90% of our paintings, with the exception of some paintings of Juan Luna, kasi naman yung style ni Juan Luna may pagka-European, is by Fabian de la Rosa. Tingnan nyo, you will not see the distant horizon kasi babalandrahan yan eh. You will not see a very distant horizon in Filipino paintings compared to European. Yung mga European paintings, maraming ganyan, very distant horizon. Filipino paintings, ay naku, babalandrahan yan ng mga puno, mga bahay. Bakit kaya? Oh, this is a more solar painting. In European painting, you will see distant horizons like this. Sa atin, bakit malapit? Kasi nga, pag ganyang kalayo, ang liliitan ng mga tao, at mga hindi niyo na makikita yung tao sa malayo. So what's the point of portraying distant horizons like that? Samantalang gusto natin makonect sa mga tao. So gusto natin malapit yung mga tao, hindi na kailangang maglagay ng distant horizon. No? Kitang-kita yun sa paintings natin. So, in spite of living in rapidly changing times, our penchant for human connectivity has remained intact. Filipinos are very creative in things that bring people together, like our feast of devotion. The Filipino fiesta will never die kasi that's the biggest single event in many provinces that brings together all kinds of people. Naku, yung mga napasama ko minsan sa fiesta sa Bohol. Naku, lahat halos ng mga Boholano nandun, pati yung mga nasa abroad uuwi para lang masama sa fiesta. No? And look at how good we are in art. No? The artistic gifts of Filipinos are world-class and are great social magnets. Dahil sa art, we bring people together. Our weaving traditions, dance groups, vocal and instrumental performers were among the best, if not the best, choral groups in the world. Our theater groups, ancestral houses, traditional architecture, and martial arts, no? Ang galing na pang-akit ng mga tao yan. And definitely an asset for tourism is the Filipino genius in organizing activities that really bring people together, like beauty pageants and big international events. Kaya, alam ba niyo na ang Pilipinas pinakamarami ng panalo sa beauty pageants? Not necessarily in one category, but pag simasamahin niyo lahat ng categories, tayo ang pinakamarami. Kasi nga, ang galing mang-akit ng mga tao niyan eh. So, togetherness is happiness. For many Filipinos, being together, particularly during feasts and celebrations, is a much sought-after ritual that symbolizes our deep sense of humanity's oneness. In the midst of the social disruptions brought about by the pandemic, Filipinos will grasp at anything that will fulfill this desire for togetherness. Kaya ang hirap sa Pilipino to observe social or what really is physical distancing. This may cause quarantines or lockdown orders to be violated. Pero kung talaga intindihin niyo ang meaning ng pakikipagkapwa or oneness with others, it is to be concerned for the common good or each other's well-being. So in this light, physical distancing becomes an act of kindness and consideration for others. Yan ang totoong pakikipagkapwa. This falls true for webinars, blended learning, and other forms of online communication, which are the closest we can get to one another in this time of COVID. Ang tunay na pakikipagkapwa, talagang mag-observe kayo ng protocols para hindi magkahawahan, no? And the strong urge to connect makes Filipinos a very expressive people. There's a survey done in 2012, tayo ang pinaka-expressive. For the more we open up, the more we convey our feelings, thoughts, and ideas, the easier it's for us, it's for other people to connect to us or for us to connect to other people. Kaya tayo nagiging maximalist eh. The term horror vacui is wrong. We are not afraid of open spaces. We are rather maximalist. Ano ba yung feeling maximalist? Filling up every available space with forms. Kasi nga, napaka-exuberant natin. Our exuberance is deeply rooted in emotional sensitivity and the urge to connect. Kaya lahat ng kwento sa buhay, ilalabas yan. Masyadong expressive. Lahat ng tungkol sa chismis, ilalabas natin para makapag-connect sa kapwa. Yan, Pilipino na Pinoy yan. Walang ganyan sa mundo, tayo lang yun. No? Even in modern art, punuan. No? Yan, punuan, even in modern art. And madrama mga Pinoy. Kasi nga, we love to express. That's why in a way, our culture is a theater laboratory. Openness and expressiveness through performance is a great social magnet. Magaling na pang-connect sa kapwa. Kaya we have so much energy for theater, for performance. Madrama tayo. And we make sure that we retain the ability by training our children from the earliest age to become performers. Nung mali kayo, sino nakaligtasan niyo? Pagdating ng bisita, pagdating ng ninong, oy, labas ka rito, mag-recite ka ng poem, kumanta ka, tumugtog ka ng piano, whatever, mag-circo ka, para masiyahan yung mga bisita. Talagang maliit pa tayo, ginagawa na tayong performers, kaya ang galing-galing natin sa music, ang galing natin sa theater, ang galing natin sa sayaw. No? Our culture is a virtual theater laboratory. Kaya number 1 tayo, according to the survey, we are number 1 in using karaoke for singing. Nag-agawan pa sa mikropono. Maaring ang Hapon dineveloping karaoke, but actually isa pa sa Filipino, Bert de Rosario, who invented karaoke. Dinevelop lang ng Japan. At until now, we are the biggest users of karaoke. No. Napaka-expressive kanina natin eh. Now, what good is expressiveness? No? Expressiveness leads to health. Sabi nga ng mga doktor, being expressive, especially to the performing arts, is an effective way of maintaining a healthy heart. Expressiveness releases harmful emotions. That's why I think this is one reason why women all over the world live longer than men. Kasi napaka-expressive ng mga babae. That's why there are more widows than widowers all over the world. No? And ito yung sinasabi kong research. In 2012, this was published. The Philippines is the world's most emotional country. Second rank was El Salvador. It's a study na ito, pinaka-hindi emotional was Singapore. Tingnan nyo, ayan, study, out of 150 countries, tayo ang pinaka-emotional. Yung pinaka-nagdidilim dyan na yun, Pilipinas. Ayan, kita nyo, 54 and above. Ano ibig sabihin ng emotional? The more emotional you are, the more you have something to express. Puno-puno kayo ng emotion, puno-puno kayo ng expression. That's why being emotional means being very expressive. That's why, importante sa atin ang means of communication and expression. Very, very indispensable elements. Expression and communication are indispensable elements of Filipino culture. Because experiencing the great diversity of human and natural phenomena through television, cinema, radio, internet, and print media extends our senses, affirms our being, and connects us to the world. Pag nawala ang mga ito, pag nawala ang mga television channels natin, para na nating tinanggalan ng mata at tainga ang mga tao. Magagalit talaga ang mga Pilipino. In fact, the more tools for experiencing the world, the better. No? Yan ang gusto-gusto ng mga Pilipino. For Filipinos who value interconnectedness above all, these tools of perception are a non-negotiable demand. That is why we are number 1 in social media in the whole world. Dagdag nyo, no? Some means for connecting to the world, our facility for language. Yan ang isang paraan natin. Talagang facility for language and passion for travel and mobility. Ang hilig natin dyan to really connect, no? And I can say that our fetish for English cannot be fully explained by colonial mentality. Filipinos value English as their best thing to the world right now. Kasi nga, international language. And there is another study published in 2013. Countries where people feel the most love. Tayo ang pinakamataas dyan, 93%, followed by Rwanda, Puerto Rico, 90%. No? Yan, no? Pinakanamumula ang Pilipinas. Yan pa lang, kitang-kita niya ebidensya na pinakamahilig tayo makapag-connecta sa mga tao. In fact, you can say that we are the most romantic in the world. Kaya ang laki-laki ng population natin, ang bilis dumamit. No? Yan ang nangyayari. Now, let's look at this. Because every kind of connectivity uses a technique. Ang galing natin sa multiplicity. This is the most effective technique that we use to bring people together. Ang isang bagay, lagyan niyo ng maraming gamit. Ang isang bagay, lagay nyo ng maraming functions and uses so that they will attract or bring together people of different tastes and preferences. The fiesta has been mentioned. But other examples abound. Halo-halo, sinigang, kare-kare, chop suey, medley, and many more. Tinin yung sinigang. 3-in-1 dish. Nandiyan ang soup, vegetables, meat, fish or shrimp, tatlong klaseng pagkain. May lahat mahilig ko tayo sa mga tapsilog, longsilog, bangsilog, and medley. Lahat ng papalitin yung kanta nandiyan, kaya very attractive. No? It really brings people together. Filipino films, ang hirap i-classify. Kasi maski action film, may feature elements of comedy, drama, music, or fantasy. Parang napaka-diversified ng mga natin, ginagawa natin. Yan, andyan ang lahat. Tanggalin nyo na lang, ayaw nyo. Ito, galinera. Masarap upuan, magandang work of art, at the same time, kulungan ng manok yan. 3 values in 1. And multiplicity means we put everything together in one place or in one object. Eh, sari-sari store, extension ng panty yan, nagiging tambayan kasi lahat ng kailangan ng community nandiyan na. Napalitan na yan ng mga convenience stores right now, no? Bookstore becomes a department store. Drugstore becomes a grocery. Gasoline station becomes an eatery. Kung gusto nyo maging matagumpay sa negosyo, diversify. Kung bookstore lang kayo, maaaring malugi kayo kung bookstore lang. Kasi ang Pilipino, pag nagpunta sa isang lugar, barkada. Eh, kung isa lang mahilig sa libro ang gagawin ng iba, wala silang gagawin doon. Kaya kailangan mag-diversify kayo, no? But of course, the champion of multiplicity is the Filipino mall. It brings together the sari-sari store. According to the study of Dr. Delberto Alegre, magaling na researcher on Philippine culture, the Filipino mall daw brings together the sari-sari store, park, and plaza in gigantic proportions. Kaya naman talagang nakakaakit ng mga tao. Filipino malls could be the most multi-purpose in the whole world. Saan naman kayo nakakita ng mall na pwede kayo magbayad ng bills, mag-renew ng lisensya, mag-apply ng passport, magsimba, magpagamot, magmalengke, lahat na nandyan. Walang ganyan yata sa mundo, tayo lang, ano? Now, so what is our culture? Our culture, at its best, or Filipinos at their best, are a highly nurturing, caring, sharing people because we are people who love to connect with a strong maternal orientation and definitely not loners. Kaya ang galing ng mga healthcare givers caregivers natin, no? Health frontliners, mga doktor. Definitely we are not loners. Because of our genius in interpersonal communication and nurturing, caring attitude, we excel in the service professions or industry. So, we have an expanded sense of self. Our sphere of being includes not only our individual self, but also our immediate family, relatives, friends, and associates. Our life is one of sharing with others such things as making choices, resources. Maski hindi oras ang pagkain, pagdating ng bisita, kumain ka na ba? We share our time, feelings, concerns. Saan ka pupunta? Saan ka galing? Anong ginawa mo noon? O ano nung comments hindi niyo pwedeng tanong yun sa ibang bansa. That's none of your business. Ito may pakialam tayo because we feel connected. No? Pag may pista, pwede makikain kahit kaninong bahay, basta't may handa. Uuwi ka na lang, may pabalot pa. Pag may nanalo, malamang ibalato. In our food culture, according to Claude Tayan, we have no recipe for a single person. It's always something that at least 6 to 10 people can share. That means we really prepare for a group, no? And a sharing of being makes possible a remarkable degree of openness, expressiveness, and a sense of belonging that have been observed to bring about very positive psychophysical results. You will have lower rates of depression, higher degree of mental health, and a sense of well-being, and longer life spans. No? So, our core culture of human connectivity gives us an edge over other peoples in matters of health and well-being. Lack of friends and close social ties are the hidden cause of heart disease. As social ties increase, mortality rates decrease. No? So, isang trait ng Pilipino. One trait that makes us connective. We are highly participatory. Rooted in the assumption that all of us are one, we have a strong participatory tendency in Philippine culture. Kung lahat tayo anak ng dakilang Amerika, and if each one of us is a ray, then bawat isa sa atin ay may karapatan na makilahok sa takbo ng lipunan. Meron tayong udyok o kalooban na makilahok sa takbo ng lipunan. Filipinos demand collective equal participation in creative process, decision-making, and self-determination. No one must have a monopoly of the decision-making process. Everybody must have an active role no matter how small. Wala talagang audience lang. Gusto, makisali. Kung hindi o si Zero, Miron, no? Kikialam pa rin. Our deepest social aspirations are freedom, justice, and dignity. Monopoly, dictatorship, and the curtailment of choices are natin. Hindi pwedeng walang pagpipilian. The more choices, the better. Kung titignan nyo sa ating sining, our traditional perspective in art, wala kayong makikitang single point of view. What we see is the omniscient or communal point of view as in the Slice of Life series by Larry Alcana. This is the kind of perspective that we also see in traditional Southeast Asian art, particularly in Balinese art. Maraming focal centers because this is the communal point of view, hindi point of view ng individual lamang. Yan. Ayan, maski sa Balinese art, no? This is the community. Even our weaving traditions, walang isang focal center, or even in Hernando Ocampo's work. So, communal togetherness, very important here for healing because the more together you are, the more you observe rituals as a way of life, the more you have feasts of devotion or group pilgrimages, the more you pray together for a bountiful harvest, the more you promote concern for the common good, the more creative you will be. In other words, what I'm saying here is that our creative arts is rooted in our participatory culture. Because communal or shared creativity is really a feature of communal cultures. So, communal creativity is a basic source of the great diversity of Philippine indigenous cultures. Ang dami natin yan. So, why? Bakit? Bakit in strong sense of community is very important for creativity? Because communal cultures allow people to be more expressive. Closeness to others allows us to be more trusting, open, and thus more freely expressive. Di ba? Pag nasa pamilya kayo, relax kayo, you can be more trusting and open because you belong to one group, no? Hindi kayo natatakot. Relax lang kayo. So you become more expressive. As a result, arts and crafts are richest, most creative, and diverse in communal cultures. Kaya if you look at our Katutubo, sa Katutubo, pinaka-diverse, pinakamayaman ng traditional arts and crafts. The more you go to the indigenous, mas lalong mayaman ang arts and crafts. And the farther away from this, lalong nawawala ang arts and crafts. Nagiging consumerist na lang ang mga tao. If you go to the urban areas, people are no longer productive in the arts. They become simply consumerist. And in the provinces or in more rural areas, you will know that food is tastier, speech is more melodic, and things of everyday life more colorful. Kaya ang gagaling ng art natin, especially in among the mountain peoples, no? Lakob ng mga Maranao, San Fernando Parol, mga bahay ng Tugao, yung mga panulong ng Maranao, Tugao baskets, weaving ng Ilocano, ito ay kay Fuyabing, Blaan, no? Maguindanao Malong, Tiboli weaving, Pisiyabit ng Tausug din yan, Tree of Life, mga banig ng Maguindanao, yes, Maguindanao, ito ay Tawi-Tawi Ma, ito ay Ukit ni Edimutok ng Apalit Pampanga, at ang ganda-ganda Maranao stand, stand ng Maranao Kulintang, mas maganda pa yung stand kaysa sa Kulintang, no? Mga sayaw natin all over the country, these are very, very prolific among our cultural communities, among our traditional cultures. There are 3 traditional cultures in our country. Yung sa Katutubo, Muslim Filipinos, and lowland Christian folk. No? Yan pinakamayaman sa traditional arts. Our fiestas, pahiyas, no? And of course, the paite, look at the paper mache of paite. Parang totoong prutas sa diary lang sa dyaryo yan. Oh. Galing, no? So, the human dignity to the Filipino is the creative essence within. You cannot be a human being without the creative essence. Pag hindi na developing creative essence, you are not really human. You're not fully human. Kasi yung human dignity natin ay galing sa creative essence, yun ang kaluluwa. That's why there is nothing more dehumanizing to a human being than to feel he is merely being treated as a machine. Pag tinrato niyo ang isang Pilipino, ang isang tao, lalo na Pilipino, bilang makina, the consequences for an organization will be a rapid turnover rate, absenteeism, safety violations, high accident rate, high rates of illness, and low productivity. Sabi ng isang industrial psychologist, Borton, in the workplace and in other relationships, which fail to recognize the individual as more than a robot, we see negative behaviors such as lack of cooperation and absenteeism. Lalo na sa Filipino, because napaka-feeling oriented. You know, if you look at the 4 psychological functions of Carl Jung, thinking, sensing, intuiting, feeling, we belong to the feeling category. We're very, very sensitive, no? We are the feeling people. So the sensitive Filipino soul rebels against being treated as a mere machine or robot. Nothing could be more troubling or terrifying to a Filipino than the order. Just obey or just follow the law. Without a clear and valid basis, an order is a form of coercion and will always be resisted. Hindi nyo makukuha-cooperation ng mga Pilipino. Because it violates the basic tenet of our being, a creative, soulful, and divine nature that always demands respect. So coercion and violence, as I said earlier, a high-handed approach will never work in Philippine culture. Filipinos like to be treated as friends, as family members, as partners within a community of individuals working together for the common good. Pantay-pantay tayo lahat. Walang pwersahan yan. Most of all, we like to be treated in the way our mother cares for us, inang mapagkalinga. So the need for discipline must be understood as directed towards this goal of working together for the common good and not as a form of punishment. Of course, simply in any country, in any society, of course, there will always be a few recalcitrants who deserve harsher punishment or treatment. But many officials like to impose their will on others because their addiction to power makes them so insecure they cannot dominate, control, and manipulate people. Their egos will suffer if they cannot show that they are the boss, lord, or master. They'll treat others as enemies to be subjugated and humiliated or even enslaved. So ito nga, sabi ng June 25, Philstar, government officials say that many Filipinos are disobedient and because of that, we have the highest number of COVID cases in ASEAN. But look at the data. The data show that they were wrong to blame the public because data from Google show that, in fact, people are doing their part and staying at home. At the height of the Luzon lockdown on April 10, Google mobility data recorded 90% drop on people visiting retail outlets. Nawala ang mga tao sa malls compared to pre-pandemic levels. In contrast, dumami ang tao sa bahay. In residential households, movements saw a 43% uptick during the same period. Ito, tingnan nyo, during that period, pinakamasuno rin ng mga Pilipino. Ayan, yung yellow-orange sa ilalim. Ibig sabihin tayo ang pinaka-nag-stay sa bahay compared to Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Mas maraming ang pasaway dito sa mga bansa yan. Tayo ang pinakamasuno rin, yung pinaka-ilalim. Oh. Tayo ang pinakamabait. Actually, mabait sa mga Pilipina pag talagang trinato na mabait. No? Pag talagang trinato bilang human being. Pagkagamitan ng pagpapakatao o pakikipagkapwa. And recent, last week lang lumabas ito. Last week lang lumabas itong recorded. The Philippines ranks 3rd for face mask adoption according to a new study. Aside from face masks, 42% of Filipinos were recorded to own face shields. Though the Philippines only ranked 3rd for face masks, it had the highest ownership rate of face shields out of all the other countries in this study. The UK came in 2nd, but only 13% of the population owned the full face covering. Number 1 tayo sa paggamit ng face shields. And back in July, according to SWS, 76% of Filipinos always wore face masks, contrary to popular belief that the pandemic continued to spread in the Philippines due to lack of discipline in Filipinos. In others, maraming mali ang mga nakikita natin balita na pasaway tayo. That's not true. Ever since napakabait ng Pilipino. In fact, in Dubai, nabigyan ng award ng mga Filipinos sapagkat tayo ang pinakamasuno rin sa mga batas. No? Hindi lang talaga susunod ang Pilipinas sa batas pag mali ang pagpapatupad. So, summary of main points. At any given time and anywhere in the world, there are 3 cultures that have always existed. Culture of power, wealth, and the common good. It's important to know that the core principles of Philippine ethnicity and the basis of harmony and cooperation are built upon the culture of the common good rather than the culture of power and the culture of wealth. Filipinos love to connect to people and excel in doing things that connect people, making it difficult for them to observe physical distancing. But in the light of the philosophy of pakikipagkapwa, also concern for the common good, social distancing becomes an act of kindness, consideration for others. For the Filipinos who value interconnectedness above all, The technology of communication, social media, and the arts are vital means of expression, extension of the senses, windows to the world, and a force for social transformation. A compassionate approach to curbing the spread of COVID will work better in the Filipino cultural setting. Filipinos like to be treated as friends, as family members, as partners within a community of individuals working together for the common good, and not enemies to be subjugated. So, yan lamang po. Maraming salamat sa inyong pakikinig. Maraming pong salamat sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, thank you, Chairman De Leon, Professor De Leon, for that most positive, insightful, relevant, and medyo provocative lecture.
Mabuti provocative.
Yes.
Provocative.
Oh. Yun. Thank you for positing the four cultures framework. Tapos it's also nice to be reminded of the core values which are inherently both popular and deep-seated sa mga Pilipino. Kapakatao, bayanihan, pagkalinga, malasakit, pakikipagkapwa, pakikipagkain, pakikilahok.
Totoong core values yan.
Yes, opo. Tapos these all work to describe what we call a Filipino psyche, manifesting themselves in arts, artistic expression, spatial use, our norms, our customs, language, our work ethics, and even the organizations.
Yes, exactly.
Tapos, sir, yung importance of expressions and communications come to fore, and thank you also for the new data and the very consistent and the positive insight about yung mga Pilipino hindi pasaway. This reminds us of
meron din pasaway pero minority yun eh. Minority.
Yes.
Naman sa parte ng mundo, may matigas ang ulo talaga. Hindi mawawala yun. Maski sa isang pamilya, mayroong isang black sheep usually sa isang pamilya.
This is consistent with the previous speakers, all of whom have been echoing the same thing sa mga talks namin with Muscat.
In other words, huwag tayong mawala ng tiwala sa Pilipino. Huwag tayong mawala ng tiwala. Because pag nawala tayo ng tiwala, hindi tayo makakapag-cooperate. We cannot be unified. Magiging weaker tayo.
Yes, so at this point, Doc, we would like to open the floor for questions.
Yeah, of course. Sige lang.
We are waiting for questions, but ako, sir, I would like to ask one or two questions initially. What is the future for the Filipinos, sir? Kasi considering malapit na yung Christmas and at this point in time, yung Mayor Isko has already announced isasarado yung mga sementeryo, so wala tayong venue para come together to expressions. No? Nasarado yung isa nating TV station, so nabawasan. Buti na lang yung social media. Kaya everybody is flocking to social media. What's in the future for the Filipino psyche, Doc? Sir?
Siguro naman, kasi ang pinaka-basic naman na for getting together is the family. Kasi naman paano, yung family can get closer to one another. Lalong patibayin yung mga rituals within the family. At from family to family, magkakaroon ng network of families. It will be the equivalent of the previous Christmases. Yun ang pwede natin gawin sa ngayon. Tapos, kung pwedeng magsama-sama yung mga members ng family in one place, that will even strengthen their oneness. Kasi nga, marami ngayon, hindi na nagkakasama-sama sa mga members ng pamilya, malalayo sila. Pero kung patitibayan at least within the nuclear family, lalo silang magkaroon ng meaningful celebration because they'll find themselves that they're isolated, no, physically, pero they're together within the household, lalo nilang patibayan, and therefore they can do some kind of ritual to even strengthen the family within the house. Yan siguro counterpart. And then families can do some kind of networking with other families through social media or online. Pwede naman. Kaya nga, importante itong networking natin ngayon.
Okay. Nakakalungkot lang, sir, kasi di ba, sarado yung mga food establishments. tapos bawal maglamay,
Oo.
tapos bawal magsimba o sumamba ng sabay-sabay. So, ang laking kawalan sa pakikipag salimuha ng mga Pilipino.
Siguro we can be creative. Ang napansin ko kasi, mula nang magkaroon ng pandemic, yung mga tao na sa bahay lang, natutong maghalaman. Ang dami ngayon gumagawa ng mga, well, parang online business na nagbebenta ng halaman kasi nahilig sa halaman. Tapos yung palang halaman nila, dumami hanggang pwede nang maging negosyo. At tapos, ang daming natutong magluto. At yung mga magagaling magluto, lahat ng klaseng nag-invent na ng mga bagong menu at naging negosyo na rin yung mga pagkain na invento nila o ang galing pa nilang gumawa ng ganito. So, you can be very creative within the house. Ang dami-daming kasing klaseng libangan. Nabanggit ko rin dalawa, paghahalaman, pagluto. Ang dami natin na-discover mo. Ang galing pa rin natin na ganitong klaseng pagkain.
So, yan, Dok. Totoo yan, sir. Opo.
Mga hobbies.
Oh, yes, sir. I think most of our audience or our listeners will be able to relate to that scenario.
Nagiging creative tayo within the house, no? Within the household. You become more creative.
We have questions now, sir. If I can fill them.
Yes.
From Mr. Nestor Lim. If the Filipinos are obedient in following government regulations during the pandemic, what do you think is the reason why we are not able to control the outbreak or effectively? Sir.
Yung mga ibang bansa kasi, ang pinaka-successful diyan, Vietnam. In fact, hindi pa dumarating wala pang mayroong sakit, wala pang na-infect sa Vietnam. Sinara na kaagad nila yung kanilang airports. They close their airports to anybody traveling from China or countries na mayroong infection. Sinara kaagad nila ang border nila. They did not let people who come from infected countries enter their country. Ganyan din ang New Zealand. Maaga pa lang, gawa na sila ng contact tracing. Saka, they already, yung mga Taiwan, meron sila ng experience sa SARS. Meron sila experience sa SARS. Kaya alam nila kung anong gagawing measures. And they did all of these measures. They implemented all of these measures very early. No? Eh sa atin, siguro, nang mag-umpisang mag-action, halos Marso na eh. Kaya pa ba nag-umpisa yung pandemic yan? Actually, it started in Wuhan, November 17. November 17 pa. At December, kumalat na sa Wuhan yan. January, napunta na sa Italy and other. At tayo, kumilos pa lang talaga late February. Medyo kumalat na. Ang hirap na mag-trace. That's why if you look at many countries na hindi kumilos kaagad, kagaya ng Indonesia at saka tayong pinakamarami. Sa buong Southeast Asia, pinakamarami ang Pilipino at saka Pilipinas, saka Indonesia na namatay na sa COVID. Number of infected, pinakamarami rin tayo. Yun ang yun ang aking explanation.
Okay.
So, ang magagawa na lang natin ngayon, really para talaga hindi na kumalat man lalo, as of now, gawin na lang natin lahat ng measure na pwede natin gawin. Ito, I can recommend at least 2 tablespoons of virgin coconut oil sa isang araw, isang tablet ng zinc, 2 vitamin C, lot of exercise, magpa-araw kayo for vitamin D, and matulog ng maaga. And of course, face mask, paglalabas, saka yung face shield. Yan ang nagagawa natin as of now, para talaga hindi na kumalat. Otherwise, too late na yung contact tracing eh.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Dadagdag ko lang, nasa Vietnam, pag nabalitaan nila kaagad na isang barangay, isang village ay mayroon ng sakit, yun lang i-isolate nila, doon sila maglalagay, hindi buong bansa. Hindi na kailangan buong bansa eh. Tignan nyo lang kung saan natin, at yun lang i-lockdown ninyo. Kaya naging successful sila, hindi kailangan mag-suffer yung economy. Tayo nag-suffer yung economy kasi parang naging generic yung lockdown, hindi pwede yung generic. Kasi talagang tignan nyo lang kung saan lugar meron at yun lang ila-lockdown ninyo. Para hindi mag-suffer yung economy. Kasi pag nag-suffer yung economy, wala nang hanap buhay yung mga tao, walang kakainin, lahat sakit. Yan ang nangyari. Kawawa yung mga jeepney drivers, kawawa.
Apo. Okay.
Oo.
We have another question, sir. This is from Carl Rada, a senior high school student. Do you think the culture of common good will last here in the Philippines? If not, what are the factors that will affect the culture of common good here in the country?
Walang affect yan. Culture. I can ang magbabago na ay manifestation, the way we express this culture of the common good. But it will never disappear. Why? Kasi English, magaling na tayo sa English, but it will never be rooted in our country. Maski ano pa ang gawin natin, we will always speak Ilocano, Visayan, Tipoli, Tagalog. Mawawala yung mga languages natin. Pag hindi nawala ang languages natin, we will retain this culture because our culture comes from the language we speak. Look, no? Bilang ako example. English does not have collective verbs. Walang verb sa English refer collective action. Halimbawa, magsigawa. Magsibang kayo. Nagkawang gawa. Walang ganyang verb sa English. Tayo napakarami nan. Ibig sabihin, we always think in terms of the collective. Second example, child rearing practice. Nung pinanganak kayo, anong age kayo na-win away from your parents? Di po nang pinanganak kayo, katabi kayo ng magulang. Until what age kayo katabi ng magulang? Baka hanggang 12, nakita ko, average dito sa mga estudyante ko, 12 years old. Hanggang 12 years old, katabi pa sila ng mga magulang nila. So we develop a nurturing culture. Ito ang culture of pagkalinga. Kasi able to develop emotional bonding, understanding. Hindi mo mawala yan. You cannot legislate against that. How can you legislate against what? Na bawarin yung mga magulang, itabi yung anak sa kanya na pagtulog? Hindi pwedeng ibawal yan. Pag hindi nawala yan, hindi mawawala ang culture of the common good. Mantalang merong culture, yung Western culture, pag baby pa lang, may sarili ng kamo, ibang kwarto, hindi sila na nakakapag-develop ng emotional bonding. Masyadong detached emotionally ang mga bata sa mga magulang. Kaya culture, US culture, nagkakaroon ng serial killing. Serial killing comes from people who were not able to develop any kind of emotional bonding with others. Ang dami nating element ng culture na hindi basta wala. Pag hindi nawala yan, the culture of the common good will disappear. May iba lang ang form of expression. May influence tayo, lalo yung mga nasa syudad. Pero of course, ilan ba ang nasa syudad? Konti lang compared to the people in the provinces. I think we will always be a people of bayanihan na humihina lang where the Western influence is strong, but on the whole, I don't think it will disappear. Palakasin na lang natin through education.
Okay. Thank you, sir. There's another question for Jerby Ferrer. It's a comment and a question within the comment. With regard to the recent opening of Manila Bay, the white sand beachfront, would you connect the lack of physical distancing? Siyempre, siksikan sila doon, sir. The affinity that we have to, this community spectacle, such as a new tourist attraction. Di daw po ba mas masaya kung dikit-dikit o sama-sama? I think the question
talagang
is,
mas masaya.
would you attribute what happened to the opening?
Wala.
Something indicative of the connectivity or the expressions of our psyche naganap na yun.
So much. Talagang expression ng psyche natin niya. Kasi after being in lockdown for so many months, 5 buwan naka-lockdown, siyempre sabik lumabas. At hindi natin mapipigilan ng mga tao sa excitement, especially, alam niyo, marami, mahilig ang mga tao sa Christmas, white, that mahilig tayo. Puti ang mga santo natin, puti ang kulay ng Virgin Maria, puti ang kulay ni Cristo, hindi mo naman puti yung mga tao yun. So, the excitement, it really make people ignore, no? Saka binuksan kasi, hindi naman ang kasalanan ng mga tao na binuksan parang open for visitation. So, yun, we attracted the people. So hindi kasalanan ng mga tao mag-gather kasi ang daming-daming tao. Saan niyo ilalagay yung mga tao? How can you impose social distancing pag ganun karami ang tao? Imposible. Ang liit-liit naman ang lugar na white beach doon. It's only a very small portion, Manila Bay. Siguro not in 1/10 of Manila Bay yung merong white portion. Saan napupunta yung mga tao if they like to experience it? In other words, kung kinontrol yun, kahit ganun karami, pero para kontrolin niya, you have to bring in the military. Kasi napapansin ko, pag rally, nandun ka kitang military or police. Pero pag ganyan, wala naman akong nakitang police. So talagang pinayagan ang mga tao na magsama-sama ron. And really, it's really a very Filipino activity na magdikit-dikit. Lalo na magkakaibigan, bakit sila magdito. And there's no room for social distancing. Paano kayo social distancing sa ganong kaliit na space, sa ganong karaming tao? How do you maintain social distancing? Imposible.
Okay.
So talagang when there was no choice kung hindi magdikit-dikit.
So I hope nasagot si Jervy Ferrer, ni Sir. Another question, Sir, from Raven Nicole Mendoza. What makes connectivity important in times like these?
Ng pangalan.
Raven Nicole Mendoza. What makes connectivity in times like these? Does it apply and is it effective to Filipinos given the fact that social classes, siguro yung disparities are evident?
Ang social disparities, usually yan mahirap Yung social disparities ng mayaman at mahirap, yes, social class. Kasi generally, anywhere in the world, there's no exception. Usually, mas mayayaman, mas walang compassion. Wala silang pakiramdam sa mahihirap, kadalasan ng mayayaman, ganyan Bihira na lang yung mayaman na may pakiramdam sa mahihirap. Why? Because there's so much of what? Yung means para ignorin yung mahihirap. Maski nakasakit sila ng mahihirap, maaari napatay pa yung mahirap, they can easily hire lawyers, meron silang pera para hindi sila mag-suffer na kamukha ng sa mahihirap. That's why hindi masyado na-develop yung compassion sa kanila. They can ignore the poor because they are not affected. Kaya talagang yung social disparity hindi basta mawawala yan. However, by using the concept of activity na iisa tayong lahat, very effective yan, na ituro sa mga bata, mayaman at mahirap, na tayo ay isa lamang. And there are many ways to prove that we all are one. Pag naituro yung concept ng kapwa, pagpapakatao, culture of the common good, if we teach that even to the rich people, at nagkasama from youngest age to the present, pagsama-sama sila, makikita nyo, in school, sama-sama yung mahirap at mayaman, even the rich people will develop some kind of empathy or compassion for the poor. Kaya lang, iba kasi eskwelahan ng mayayaman. Meron silang privilege, meron silang mga elite schools. Tapos yung mga mahirap nasa public schools. Anong ma-develop yung pagkakaisa, That's why there has to be some ways for the rich and the poor to be together. And dapat siguro magkaroon tayo sa educational system natin na yung mga mayayaman, karoon silang homestay sa probinsya or social immersion, cultural immersion while they will work in farms, they will live like the poor, para sila magkaroon ng sense of identity, sense of oneness with the poor people. Otherwise, talagang isolated sila. And connectivity is very important. Kasi yung feeling of compassion for others, importante yan, yung malasakit. And dito ngayon papasok ang art. Sa lahat ng tinuturo sa eskwelahan, pinaka-importante yung art. The arts are the best way to develop empathy among people, mayaman o mahirap. Kasi through art, you can enter other people's minds. Parang na-experience na ibang tao. Manood kayo ng isang pelikula, nakakapasok kayo sa problema ng isang pamilya. Ang mga mayaman, pag nakapanood sila ng pelikula tungkol sa kalagayan ng mga tao sa probinsya, they can begin to understand, especially movies, movie theater, literature, maski na music, if we get to appreciate the music of the katutubo, magiging mas close ang puso natin. That's why, for me, the most essential kind of education will be philosophy and art. Yan ang kulang sa ating paaralan. Madalas, ang tinuturo is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Baliwala yan. Kung gusto niyo ma-develop ang empathy, gusto niyo ma-develop pagkakaisa ng mga tao, the most important na philosophy, yan ang kulang na kulang sa educational system natin. Kaya kulang na kulang sa connectivity dahil wala ang philosophy at sining. Yung science, technology, engineering, mathematics, given na yan ang importante, pero hindi pwedeng yan ang mas importante sa tao. Mas importante ang philosophy at art at languages. Yan lang ang aking sagot.
Okay. So thank you, sir. Thank you for answering the questions. I think that is all the time we have for the questions. Should any of the listeners want to follow through on any of the thoughts na ni-share ni sir, please message us in our Facebook account, and you can be sure na we will forward the messages to Professor De Leon. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I would like
Yes.
I would now like to turn the session over to Ms. Cora for the concluding portion this afternoon. Ms. Cora?
Thank you very much, Raymond, for taking up that portion of our show this afternoon. June, Professor De Leon, may this be the first of many times. Wag po sanang madala. We reiterate our sincerest, we reiterate our sincerest appreciation for explaining us to us. Hindi ba? Pinaliwanag mo tayo sa amin. So maraming salamat po. And as well, we thank
Salamat
you.
sa inyo.
No, magkikita ulit tayo. As well, we thank you, our friends, participants, likers, and followers, very much for being with us. We hope to see you during our forthcoming online activities. Marami pa po yan. Muscat offers lectures, online exhibitions, and cute podcasts to celebrate Museums and Galleries Month and Buwan ng Katutubo this coming October. So please go to our Facebook page for the schedule. Do like us and on Instagram as well. Meanwhile, if you notice during the slide presentation, the cover of our book, A Delicate Balance, Batanes, Food, Ecology, and Community. There are some copies still available. Do drop us a Facebook message for information about the book. See Batanes through our book before you can visit Batanes. Celebrate Philippine culture always. Do continue to stay safe and have a fine early evening. Magandang gabi po.
Thank you very much. Maraming salamat. Magandang gabi sa inyo lahat.